Noctambula, written and produced by Oliver Arnold. Emily sat as stiff as a corpse, her body shifting lifelessly with the motion of her car, her eyes staring unmovingly ahead. It had been many hours of driving through unchanging woods in her station wagon, bags and suitcases rattling in the back, while the covered and buckled-up birdcage clinked on the seat behind. Now, in the darkest hours, and in this truly black wilderness, the road ahead still stretched on for hours. Road and trees, trees and road, Emily said, muttering. She imagined herself driving on a sphere lined with trees forever. Why not tie the steering wheel to her legs? The drive had been uneventful. That was good, but also tedious. How many of her brain's synapses were disconnected during these perpetual hours of disengaged driving? On the map, the route had looked short enough. Should have paid attention to the scale. Emily had wanted to drive alone to fit more stuff in the car. She didn't feel like making the 8-hour drive from the city to Patrick's family's summer home multiple times. Regret washed over her. Here she was, in the dead of nowhere, while also in the dead of night, a less than ideal combination. "You're doing all right, buddy?" Emily asked her budgie bird, Bodie. "Chirp," said Bodie as if in answer from under his cloth. Emily turned on the music. Crap, who was the same song she had launched her journey with 8 hours ago. How many times had she cycled her library by now? Mental note, now note more music. Her eyelids grew heavy, urging her to pull over and map. Was that safe in this area? In the middle of nowhere, best to press on. 2 minutes later, she nodded off. That's when a person's outline appeared on the side of the road, a hitchhiker. At this hour? No way she'd pick that person up. But then, what if their car had broken down? She'd certainly want people to pick her up in times of distress. Emily tried to recall if she'd passed any stalled cars. She checked her cell phone's signal strength, 3 bars. It always showed 3 bars, even with 0 reception. She drove on and found the parked car roadside, surely the hitchhikers. Emily turned, and after a few quick minutes reached the person again. But instead of standing by the road as before, the man had ventured past the ditch onto the grass, low down, apparently crouching. What were they doing? The world spun around Emily. A powerful jolt shook her awake, and then a loud bang removed any leftover sleep. Emily's eyes shot to life. She steered erratically, not discerning where to or why. The car swayed violently. Now realizing that she'd been asleep and something major had happened, panic gripped her. Luggage flew about, bells and swings in the birdcage were cling-clanging, and the boat fluttered hysterically. Oh crap! Emily pushed the brakes. Her car spun, and it came to a stop. "Sorry, Bodie." Her headlights shone on a fallen tree by the road, part of it missing, and with dust hanging over it. It's what she must have hit. Did the car take damage? There were no odd sounds. The engine still ran, and nothing was broken from what she could see from the inside. Emily hesitated to exit. It was very dark. But of course, such thoughts were ridiculous. This place was home now. Emily probed her mind for knowledge on tire changes or checking coolants. She surprised herself by even knowing the names of these things. Sadly, those top-level terms were all her mind came up with. She grabbed her phone, activated its light, and got out. Thankfully, the front of the car was okay, with a big dent in the bumper and some paint scratched off. She used her phone to shine at the car's underside. Nothing had been hit. Lucky. She was just about to get back in the car when a distant grunting made her stop. It came from the edge of the woods. Emily could make out a dark, moving shape near the ground, but the moon wasn't bright enough, and her headlights didn't cover the area. She rushed back into her car and locked the door. The engine was still running. Good. She made a quick escape and drove on. A moment later, great curiosity overcame her. What can happen when I stay in the car? She asked herself. She turned, pulled up to where she'd heard the sound, and rolled down her window. The dark hump was still there. Emily heard a cooing. She maneuvered her car to have the headlights illuminated. The lights revealed a deer. Ah, there was it. It was just a deer, sitting there on the ground, doing whatever. What exactly was the animal doing there? The deer hunched forward near the ground in a crouch. Oh, it's pooping, Emily thought. How embarrassing that I'm shining my light at it. However, the deer's rear appeared to be in the ground. Do deer dig burrows at night? Emily didn't know. A terrible thought popped into her mind. What if it's caught in a trap? I should go over there and make sure everything's all right. But her arm didn't move. Her hand didn't reach. No part of her body wanted to open the door. The thought of walking over to a freaked-out animal in the middle of the night didn't appeal. What if it has rabies? Emily didn't know what exactly rabies was, but remembered a movie where a crazed bear killed everyone. Wouldn't her appearance only freak the animal out more? Yes, and I know that, Emily concluded. Also, she would have to walk through wet grass here. Nothing I can do. Oh, that's such a lie. She put the car in gear, turned, and drove off. I didn't even try, she said to Bodhi. Am I a bad person? 1 chirp for no, 2 for yes. Bodhi had no comment. I'll call the rangers first thing in the morning, Emily said resolutely. She pulled herself together, shook the cold out of her bones, took the last sip of energy drink, and soldiered on. The phone rang. It wasn't boyfriend Patrick. Emily picked up excitedly. Hi, you won't believe what I just saw. A deer. That's great, said Patrick through the phone. There's going to be a lot more of those. Where are you at? Emily checked her navy. 20 minutes out. Can't wait to get there. At bat. Well, let me know when you arrive, said Patrick. He will be the first to know, of course, said Emily. All right, I'm going to drive more. See you soon. Emily disconnected. She felt too tired to talk, but then instantly regretted hanging up. Back to the boredom. Call him back. Nah. Melly and I'll at 20 minutes. Her eyes burned and spasmed shut against her will. Just when she could not keep them open any longer, Emily arrived at an open metal gate. Behind it, an unlit sandy driveway stretched into a thinly wooded area. Emily checked the house number and her location on her phone map. This was the correct address. The gate was open. Excellent. Patrick had everything prepared. She couldn't wait to take a hot bath. She scanned for lights in the distance, any hint as to where the actual home lay. There were none. Emily slowly rolled down the tree-lined driveway. After several minutes, she still hadn't reached the house. How long is this? The extent of things out here in the country still confounded Emily, being a city girl and all. The dark silhouette of a house appeared. She had finally arrived at a solitary Victorian home in a clearing amidst the forest. No lights for activity gave away the presence of people. Surely Patrick had closed the window shutters. Fool. Yet, there were no landscape lights either, or any illumination outside. Emily called him. Hey, it's all dark. Am I at the right house? Pointy roof, 6 windows, round driveway, right? Yes, that's the one, said Patrick. You'll have to turn on the propane. The house can run on its battery only for a bit. What do you mean? Said Emily, unloading groceries and Bodhi. You'll want long-term power that comes from the propane, replied Patrick patiently. Emily shook her head, even though Patrick could not see her. Why hadn't you done it? Oh, I'm not at the house, said Patrick with an air of told you so. Emily nearly dropped Bodhi. What do you mean? Her voice grew angry. I thought you called me from the house. Patrick stayed calm. You didn't get my text? Emily checked her messages. Nothing. Nope. Sorry, I couldn't make it today. I had to work late. I'll be with you in a day or 2. Emily loaded Bohi back into her car. Her voice grew angry. I'm leaving. How can I stay in a strange abandoned house I've never been to? I don't even have the key. The key's outside, said Patrick calmly. It's outside? She lowered her voice. You mean accessible to all? It's hidden, said Patrick reassuringly. Under a rock near the door. Great, no one can find it there. Emily composed herself. What if the place is filled with drug addicts or squatters? Patrick laughed, but then quickly suppressed his amusement. Well, they would have turned on the lights, no? Very funny, not in the mood, Emily said, rolling her eyes. Listen, everything around the house is automatic, said Patrick matter-of-factly. The generator will activate as soon as there's demand. Just turn on the gas main and the fridge. Emily wasn't sold. She launched a last attempt to reason with Patrick. And I bought all these groceries, too many for one person. She glanced at the tiny bag of food she'd picked up at a gas station. I'm not staying here by myself tonight. Isn't there a hotel? I'll find a hotel. There's nothing within 3 hours, said Patrick. After a pause, he continued. I'll see you soon, okay? Emily said. If there's any kind of issue, even at 4 a.m., I'll call you and you better pick up, or it's over. It is over. No problem. I'll sleep with the phone, said Patrick. Had a good night. Use any bed you want. Emily hung up. What would any decent girl do in such a dark and scary place, she said, rubbing her face. The building itself, as far as she could tell from the headlights, was somewhat pretty. It looked well maintained, too. All right, not sleeping in the car, she said to Bodhi. Let's get inside. Emily fumbled with her phone light, trying to locate that stone. A surging breeze enveloped her. She felt the air stream past, only to reverse a moment later, with the trees swaying and rustling along, as if the forest took in her scent. She found the rug. Under it, as promised, sat the key. She tried it on the front door. It worked immediately, and the door swung open to a gaping black. Emily reluctantly reached around the door frame, along the wall for the light switch, fully expecting to touch a giant spider in its stead. But no arachnid met her hand, not even a web, only a nice and clean designer switch. She flicked it, and the ceiling light lit. Emily was pleased and relieved, and the day's first smile crossed her face. It's working great, she mumbled to herself, picking up the birdcage and groceries from the threshold. The home's interior was cozy, a mixture of cabin and modern chic rustic, with an iron stove, fireplace, and an open kitchen. Homey and clean. This was a design of furniture that Emily would never ever allow in a habitat of hers, but somehow out here, and in this house, all of it was okay. Bum, bum. Emily was thrust out of her contemplation by the chiming of a large grandfather clock that stood back in the rear of the hallway, half concealed by shadow. It was 2 a.m. Emily made her way to the kitchen, turned on the fridge, and began to sort her groceries into it. The appliance emitted an awkward gargle, then a hiss, finally reaching a continuous buzz that sounded normal to Emily. She placed the birdcage on the table by the kitchen. I know, Bodhi, this feels dreadfully scary, but I swear it'll be beautiful once the sun is up tomorrow, Emily said without conviction. Remember, I showed you all the pretty pictures? After opening all the drawers, she found scissors and cut food bags, distributing their contents across the cabinets. Finished with grocery chores, she took some time to take everything in. Emily went to the propane tank, turned its valve, and yawned. It was 2:30 in the morning. She strolled to the first bedroom she could find, lay down, and was out after a minute. Chapter 2. The following morning, Emily got up from bed late. Last night's drive had deeply exhausted her. She had used what little was left of the morning to fetch remnants of her stuff from the car, and now sorted through socks while having tea and chatting with her friend Courtney on the phone. What? I can't hear you, Emily said with annoyance. She shook her phone. Like Bad's gonna fix it, she said to herself, mumbling. Hello? Yeah, the reception here sucks, Emily continued. No, the place has no landline, and before you ask, no TV, no internet, nothing. She snorted with laughter. But listen to this. I fell asleep driving last night. I don't know for how long. She fetched note from the fridge and poured some into her tea. No, my car doesn't have auto drive. I woke up when I hit a tree that must have fallen onto the road. Nothing else happened. Must have pushed the thing out of the way. Why was there a tree on the road at night? Don't know. Fell off a truck, maybe? She took a sip of tea, made a face of disgust, and spat into the sink. "Crap," Emily said. Milk went bad. She smelled the bottle, wrinkled her nose, and then poured the remaining milk down the sink. After tossing the bottle, she looked out the window. "Yes, I love it here," she said. Suddenly, Emily twitched, her eyes focused on a singular point outside. "Ooh." A buckhead emerged from the woods and casually munched grass in front of her house. "A deer!" Emily exclaimed into the phone. "Do you think I can pet it?" she asked Courtney. "Deer are full of ticks? That's a vital safety tip, Courtney. Thank you very much." Emily snorted. "Oh, apropos deer, I have to tell you about something else that happened last night. Suddenly the deer outside looked up, froze, and ran off into the woods. "Oh, it ran off," Emily said with some sadness. She craned her neck to see where it went, and that's when she noticed a sedan driving up to her house. I have a visitor. I gotta go. Nah, I'll call you right back. Bye." Emily hung up and went to the door. Before opening it, she observed the car outside. It was slightly on the shabby side with only one person in it, a man she didn't recognize. The guy got out and casually walked up to the house, looking about as he did. Emily could now see that he was chubby, in his mid-30s, wearing a camo shirt and pants. Emily felt unease creeping up. But why? Surely this was a neighbor. The guy was nearly at the door. He could see her through the glass. How embarrassing. Emily looked down on herself. She wore an airy dress she had found fitting for the environment earlier. Was this too light, too transparent, too revealing? Well, it was certainly too late, as the guy had reached the door. She opened. "Good morning, man," the man said with a polite smile. "Would you be interested in fresh sustenance today?" Emily didn't comprehend. What?" Now the guy looked confused. After a moment, he said, "You're not from around here?" Emily hesitated. No." Her appearance was too obviously different to lie. "No problem. Welcome," said the man. "Come along if you will." He walked to the back of his car. Emily followed hesitantly. "Name's Raiden, by the way," he said, nodding. Emily wasn't sure if this was his first or last name. She nodded back. The man opened the trunk of his car. It was loaded with coolers of many sizes. Emily still didn't understand what the man wanted and looked confused. The guy flipped open the coolers. They contained raw meat. "I sell ribeye steak, brisket sometimes, and tenderloin, all at killer prices," he said, rubbing his nose. "Oh, okay," said Emily, looking across the red chunks of meat, trying to conceal her disgust. "You sell meat? Out of your trunk?" "Yup, family business since 1995. Suddenly, the deer reappeared by the woods, catching Emily's eye. The man glanced at the animal, sizing it up. "I'd also got the best deer sausage," he said, and produced what appeared to be a garbage bag to grab the tangle of sausages from it, presenting them to Emily. "No thanks," Emily said too quickly. "Right, no problem. Stay away from those deer, man. They're loaded with ticks," he then said. He looked Emily over. "If you like deer, I can get you a full carcass." No thanks, I'm vegetarian," Emily said, shuddering. The man nodded silently. He looked around and noticed the dent in Emily's car. "What happened there?" "Oh, that? Hit a fallen tree last night," said Emily. When Raiden looked at her sideways, she added, "Isn't that normal around here?" Raiden gave her a peculiar look. "You out here alone?" "No," Emily replied very quickly. "Can I help you with anything today then, ma'am?" Raiden asked Emily, not with an air of annoyance. No thanks," replied Emily, rubbing her arm. Raiden nodded, greeted Emily silently, got back into his car, and drove off. Emily stared after him for a while, then snorted to herself. "I think we have one of those in Jersey. Gross." She watched as the car vanished between the trees. Emily hoped for the deer to return and waited. When it didn't, she went back inside. "Bodhi, I'm glad you are loaded with ticks, I think." She placed her cell phone on the small side table by the door. It fit perfectly into a tire pattern in its center, exciting her. This little table's just made for the 21st century. Emily thought of the meat guy and felt ashamed. Maybe selling food this way was normal in the countryside, and she'd insulted the guy who was just providing for his family. She'd ask Patrick later. She went on and finished her unpacking, a whole lot of clothes that she, for now, put on the living room table. While she moved clothing from A to B, a hard plastic cube fell from within a stack of clothes and rolled across the floor. Ah, the camera. Emily had forgotten all about it. She had bought a rugged action camera as a surprise gift for Patrick. They would journal all their adventures with it. Emily fumbled with the buttons. She hadn't read the manual yet and didn't quite understand how the thing worked. After a few pointless minutes, she put it down. I'll let P figure it out, she thought, and removed the last items from her suitcase, 2 photo frames with pictures of her parents and Patrick, which she placed on the cabinet. Emily felt restless and not in the mood to store all the clothes neatly away just yet. She hadn't looked around the house so far and began exploring it. 12 rooms altogether. The size of the place impressed her. From Stewie and the city to this, and all for the 2 of them. Emily remembered why she'd come here in the first place, and again felt the excitement she'd experienced seeing the pictures Patrick had shown her. She inspected the master bath, nice and clean. Some dead flies in the tub, but that was to be expected after the home's being empty for months. She turned on the shower to flush the mugs. The water sputtered and shot out loads of thick reddish slime. Oh dear, it's blood, thought Emily, but felt foolish once it cleared. Oh, it's rust. She left the bath, went to grab Bully's cage, and headed outside. There was work to do. Patrick had explained to her how to maintain the home's vital systems. He even provided a little printed manual he'd created. Emily began to clean the solar power setup, with Bodhi chirping happily in the sun. She checked the battery water level and surveyed the propane tank's fittings with satisfaction, feeling every bit the off-grid hipster she aspired to be. Next, she changed the generator's spark plugs. She wished Patrick were here. Emily had followed his instructions to the letter, but had no experience with combustion engines whatsoever. What exactly is a torque wrench, she thought, and called him. Beep, beep, beep. The call didn't go through. Emily checked her cell's reception. It showed 3 bars. Annoyed, Emily pocketed it and started the generator. When it loudly rattled, she hastily hit the stop button. Reflecting on a friend's joking comment about her being too domesticated, Emily wondered if she could handle the simple life as much as she'd claimed. Homesteading, a lifestyle of self-sufficiency characterized by subsistence agriculture, home preservation of food, and may also involve small-scale production of textiles. That's what ChatGPT had told her. Emily squinted at the neglected vegetable garden, half amused, half annoyed. It looked more like a wild thicket than any kind of intentional planting, a clear sign that no one had been around. Weeds sprawled freely, some with thorns hard enough to tear clothing, as Emily quickly found out. She slapped her neck. Every single bug here wants to bite or sting or burrow under your skin, she told Bodhi, and marched inside to reappear outfitted in long pants, a long-sleeved shirt, a wide-brimmed hat complete with a neck flap, and thick leather gloves. Try biting through this, suckers, she declared, raising her fist in challenge, proud that she had wisely packed all these things. To be safe, though, Emily sprayed a ton of bug spray as well, though when this made her nauseous, she quickly stopped. After the toxic cloud had dissipated, Emily began pulling weeds. Each yank revealed roots impossibly deep. How did they grow so big with no one watering? Emily pictured what she'd look like after a lifetime of living in this area. Probably like that meat guy. Now that she'd moved here into the switch house, perhaps she, Emily, would soon evolve into a crone herself. Her teeth yellow and crooked, her nails long and pointy, she'd run after children who dared ring her bell on Halloween. Get off the lawn, I don't have. Despite the momentary dark humor, Emily's heart swelled with hope. All this backbreaking work would transform into something magical, a sanctuary of serenity, a testament to self-sufficiency. She imagined documenting her journey, creating a blog that would chronicle every triumph and mishap. Future generations would read about her adventures, her and Patrick building their dream from scratch, raising children who would know the rhythm of the land, the pulse of true independence. Why hadn't Patrick's family stayed in this place? She realized he'd never elaborated, and she'd never asked. Emily remembered the first message Patrick had sent her in that online forum. Urban dwellers can be agricultural revolutionaries too, he'd written, challenging her post about needing land to grow real food. 6 weeks of digital debates about sustainable living had eventually led to that first meeting at the rooftop garden co-op in the city. She'd been surprised by him then, a finance guy with soil under his fingernails, comfortable in both worlds, but belonging fully to neither. "My family has a place," he'd mentioned casually over their third date, scrolling through photos of this very house on his phone. Completely off-grid, solar, propane, the works. His eyes had lit up describing the technical specs. And he's good-looking too, unlike many people who are into these things, Emily thought. This place, inherited from his family, was going to be their little homestead, their ground zero, and Emily's playground and learning pen. They'd sit out any plague in comfort and learn about rural life and themselves. Her excitement bubbled beneath her skin like an electric current. After finishing her weed duties in the garden, she managed to nearly sever her toe while cutting wood. The chainsaw had slipped, but, luckily, she wore heavy work boots and the thing jumped off, but not before removing a sizable chunk of rubber and leather. With no hospital nearby, that would have been a nice, self-applied compression treatment, maybe about an hour of excruciating pain before her tiny over-the-counter painkiller set in. She sure needed to be more cautious, or leave this man stuff to Patrick. He would instead explore the environment until he came. No, the trip wasn't a waste of time, she told herself. It was a mission, reconnaissance. Emily stood alone on her porch in the quiet afternoon, feeling an unexpected wave of exhaustion. She stretched and sighed, realizing she'd rarely felt so physically drained. Must be the good fresh air. Wait, didn't I say that before? Must be true. She checked the time, 5 p.m. For the life of her, she couldn't keep her eyes open. With nothing much else to do, she went to bed. Chapter 3. Emily sighed as she refilled Buddy's water bowl. "Can't believe I just woke up." She ran a hand through her tangled hair, wincing as her fingers caught in the knots, and went over to the grandfather clock. 11 a.m. I don't think I've ever slept so deeply. Must be the fresh air. Again, this fresh air thing. Her limbs felt leaden, her body stiff, not refreshed, with a movement sluggish like she was waiting for molasses. She couldn't think of a better analogy. What exactly was molasses anyway? Despite 14 hours of sleep, exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. She squinted at the sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, the brightness making her head throb. Still groggy, she headed to make herself a much-needed coffee, the routine movements providing a small comfort in this strange new rural life. Countryside living isn't just a lifestyle, it's a spiritual journey, she'd proclaimed with conviction, envisioning blog-worthy moments around every corner. The coffee machine gurgled and hissed, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma. Emily breathed it in, hoping the familiar scent would clear the fog from her mind. Cup in hand, she trudged to the little table where she distinctly remembered leaving her phone last night. But when she reached for it, her fingers met empty space. The phone was gone. She set down her mug, with more force than intended, coffee sloshing over the rim and onto the weathered tabletop. "I swear I put it right here," she muttered, wiping the spill with her sleeve. Emily looked around the kitchen, methodically scanning the granite countertops, rifling through her canvas bag hanging by the door, even peering into the sink in case she had placed it somewhere absent-mindedly while preparing dinner last night. When that produced nothing, irritation crept up within her. She moved on to the living room, the floorboards creaking beneath her bare feet. The morning light cast long shadows across the furniture, lending the room an eerie quality she hadn't noticed before. Emily crouched to peer under the sofa and slipped her hand between the worn cushions. She found crumbs, a penny, a forgotten hair tie, and a spider that scuttled away from her probing fingers. Of no phone. "Come on," she groaned, pushing herself to her feet. There has to be somewhere. Frustration mounting, she dragged a wooden stool across the floor and stood on it, stretching to glance over the tops of taller shelves and cabinets. She was determined to leave no corner unchecked in this unfamiliar house that still didn't quite feel like home. That's when something odd caught her eye. A small hole in the wall behind a piece of furniture, partially hidden and surrounded by a cluster of cables. The wallpaper around it was discolored, as if someone had patched it hastily. At first glance, it seemed like part of an old speaker setup, maybe remnants from the previous owner's renovation. She brushed it off with a shrug, deciding it wasn't mission critical. With a defeated sigh, she collapsed onto the floral couch, the overly puffy cushions enveloping her tired body, her fingers tightly gripping the now lukewarm coffee mug. Her eyes roamed the room in restless thought, taking in the faint mustiness that seemed to permeate everything despite her best cleaning efforts. How could it just vanish? The isolation of her new home suddenly felt oppressive rather than liberating. Without her phone, she was completely cut off. No calls, no texts, no social media. No way to contact Patrick if something went wrong. With a flash of suspicion, she glanced at Bodhi, who watched her from his cage with beady, intelligent eyes. "Did you take it?" she teased, eyeing him playfully, desperate to break the tension she felt building up inside herself. "Or maybe we've got some mischievous mice around here." Bodhi tilted his head, regarding her with what almost looked like amusement, before letting out a sharp squawk that echoed through the quiet house. "Bodhi, sometimes I'll think you don't understand me at all," Emily said, glancing at her feathered companion, who was busy attacking a wooden toy bead in his cage and paid her no heed. Maybe they could run a phone line from town? Emily had read somewhere that they buried cables in the ocean between continents. Why not between forests? After her viral documentary made her famous, after she had millions in the bank, she'd just have one custom laid. That could be another show, in fact. Emily F. brings broadband to backwater. She smiled at the thought, momentarily forgetting her missing phone. Rising from the couch, Emily moved to the window, gazing out at the overgrown yard that stretched toward the woods beyond. She frowned, noticing a few uneven patches in the soil. The ground seemed to undulate subtly, as if breathing. Could it be a sinkhole? Did such geological phenomena exist in this region, or were they confined to wet coastal areas? Emily realized that she knew nothing about sinkholes and where and why they appeared. She would have to research foundations, their types, and how they worked. Yet another thing. The coffee was cold now, but Emily drank it anyway, grimacing at the bitter taste. She set the empty mug down with determination. Without her phone, without the constant digital tether to her old life, she felt adrift, irritable. But wasn't that what she wanted? To disconnect, to experience life unfiltered through a screen? "Fine," she announced to the empty room. "I'll live authentically today." Emily set out to clear her mind by exploring the woods surrounding her new home. She ransacked her closet, pulling out gear she'd bought for this very purpose. She was dressed for adventure, a character in her own narrative. Sturdy hiking boots with red laces, cargo pants with more pockets than she knew what to do with, a tactical backpack filled with water balls and granola bars from the gas station, and a wide-rimmed hat that she adjusted in the mirror, trying to strike the perfect balance between practical and photogenic. When she stepped outside, the sky was a flat, dismal gray, casting a heavy shadow over everything. Not the golden, dappled light she'd envisioned for her documentary footage, but hey, she didn't have her phone to film anyways. Emily found herself drawn to the eerie, somber ambiance. There was something compelling about it, something that felt more authentic than the cheerful, curated nature. She scanned her surroundings, noticing how the tall, wiry trees seemed to loom over her like silent sentries, their branches sparse and gnarled, reaching toward the cloudless sky like starved arms in search of help. The ground was thickly blanketed in damp leaves, filling the air with the rich scent of wet earth and decay. Each step produced a soft squelch, the sound oddly satisfying in the stillness. Emily noticed that many of the trees were shedding out of season. Russet and amber leaves drifted down around her, though it was only early summer. Others stood dead and skeletal, blackened and brittle as if struck by lightning or disease. Scattered stumps dotted the forest floor, their rings telling stories of lives cut short. Emily didn't know what to make of this, if anything, but couldn't help but narrate in her head, crafting the voiceover she would add later. Bay 15 in the wilderness, and I've abandoned technology to connect with nature at its most raw and unfiltered. The thought made her smile, despite the unsettled feeling in her stomach. She stopped and took in the setting. "This is not what I expected," Emily whispered, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. The forest was supposed to be vibrant, teeming with life. Instead, it felt sick, dying, as if something had poisoned it from within. Curious, she stepped up to one of the old trees and pressed her fingers into the bark. It crumbled at her touch like wet cardboard. "Gross," she muttered, but then leaned in for a closer look despite herself. Just then, a creak echoed in the silence, making her pause and look around. The sound was sharp, out of place in the quiet forest. Emily turned, scanning the trees, but didn't see any obvious source. Wind through branches? An animal moving through the underbrush? The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she suddenly felt watched, though she could see nothing but trees and mist. Then, without warning, a loud crack and tearing noise erupted from behind her, like thick fabric ripping on a massive scale. Emily whipped around just in time to see an enormous oak toppling toward her, its roots tearing free of the soft earth. The huge trunk was hurtling straight at her with shocking speed, its shadow growing across her face. Instinct took over. She leapt aside, her boots slipping on the damp leaves. The trunk crashed down inches away from where she stood moments before, splintering on impact. Rotted wood exploded in all directions, showering her with debris and a cloud of dust that made her cough and gag. Heart hammering in her chest, Emily simply stood and stared. After the dust settled, she caught her breath, her pulse racing in her ears, and leaned over to inspect the shattered remains. The brittle wood crumbled between her fingers like ash. The tree hadn't been felled by wind or lightning. It somehow died, perhaps by disease, weakened until it could no longer stand. Is it time to go home? Was this a bold and obvious sign from the forest to have her leave? Emily thought, a chill running down her spine despite the warmth of the day. For a moment, she considered turning back, returning to the supposed safety of the house with its mysterious holes and vanishing phones. Her fingers itched for her missing device, longing to document this decay. But after only a minute, reason returned. Shaking off the shock, Emily continued her exploration, moving cautiously around the rotting stumps and hollowed-out logs. The forest grew denser as she walked, the trees pressing closer together, branches interlacing overhead to block out what little light filtered through the clouds. She walked on, closely tracking her path, as she was well aware that without a map on her phone, she could get lost easily. After another 10 minutes, Emily entered a swampier area than what surrounded her house. The air felt thicker here, harder to breathe, heavy with moisture and the sweet-sour smell of decomposition. But just as she thought she was safely on her way, navigating the treacherous ground with growing confidence, her foot twisted painfully into a hidden hole, her ankle wrenching with a sharp stab of pain. She cried out. Emily tried to shift her weight to the other leg, only to feel herself sinking deeper, the earth giving way beneath her. Her other leg, too, slipped into the soft, crumbling ground, trapping her up to her knee in the cold, wet soil. "Oh, crap," she muttered, her heart pounding as she struggled to free herself, pulling desperately at her trapped limbs. Every movement caused her to sink further into the decaying forest floor until she was buried up to her hips, the earth seeming to actively draw her down rather than simply yield into gravity. Panic surged through her like ice water as she clawed at the loose dirt, trying to pull herself out. The more she struggled, the faster she sank, the ground sucking greedily at her body. Her voice cracked with fear, echoing uselessly against the silent trees. Oh, how she wished that weirdo meat guy were nearby right now. She paused to catch her breath, forcing herself to think past the rising terror. Panicking would only make her sink faster. She had learned that on TV. She needed to distribute her weight and find something solid to hold on to. As she surveyed the ground, her eyes caught on a pale object protruding from the soil beside her, yellowed and smooth, curving gently up from the earth. A bone. All artificial calm left Emily instantly. She freaked. Agitated beyond reason, she dug frantically at the ground with her hands, clawing her way upward inch by painful inch, mud-coating her arms to the elbows. She finally managed to hook her fingers around a nearby root. With one final, Herculean effort, she wrenched herself free from the sucking earth, the ground releasing her with a wet, reluctant smacking. She scrambled to her feet, legs coated in black mud, and staggering backward. Then she broke into a run, not daring to look back. Branches ripped at her face, roots threatened to trip her, but fear drove her forward, her breath coming in ragged gasps, heartbeat thundering in her ears. After what felt like an eternity, Emily finally slowed, lungs burning and legs quivering with exhaustion. She found a tree, the sturdiest she could see, and leaned against it, sliding down to sit at its base, her breath shallow and ragged. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving her cold and shaking, her pulse gradually steadying as her mind tried to process what just happened. "What's wrong with this place?" she whispered, looking around at the dying forest. The trees appeared to draw nearer, their silent presence felt almost menacing. The image of the bone flashed vividly in her mind, intensifying the growing sense of dread. Gradually, her eyes grew heavy, despite her fear, exhaustion overwhelming her. The forest around her blurred and softened, colors bleeding together in a greenish-gray haze. Without realizing it, Emily drifted off, her head lolling against the rough bark. When Emily woke sometime later, the day hadn't advanced much. She dropped awake, half expecting some terrible thing kneeling right next to her, ready to devour her, or perhaps that meat guy just lowering his pants. Instead, all was peaceful around her, and great doubt and shame overcame Emily. She analyzed the events. Some old rotting trees, some mud holes. That was really all she had experienced. Suddenly, she felt good about being alone, unobserved. No one had witnessed her embarrassing behavior. "Witless city girl scared by tree" would be the headline in the local newspaper had rescuers retrieved her. She was weeping like death was upon her when I found her stuck in some mud. I grabbed a stick and pulled her out. Got a little dirty. The interviewed meat guy, what was his name, would tell the newspaper. Patrick would have a good chuckle. Emily made a decision. She would never share these events with anyone. Chapter 4. Emily blinked, her eyes adjusting to the dim, early morning light that filtered weakly through the curtains. She was still in bed, with a cloud of confusion settling around her. Am I home? Yes. New home. Her head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. Not quite a hangover, but something similar, a fog that refused to lift despite her best efforts to clear it. With a frustrated groan, she pushed herself upright and scanned the unfamiliar room, her thoughts drifting anxiously to her cell phone. She needed to find it desperately, if only for telling the time. The gray, muted light filtering through her thin curtains gave her no clue whether it was early dawn or approaching dusk. Emily swung her legs over the edge of the bed, fumbling in a half-awake daze. After visiting the grandfather clock, 11 a.m., she checked all common smartphone traps with increasing urgency, under her pillow, beneath the rumpled mattress, and through the scattered clothes from last night that lay in small heaps on the floor. "Where is the damn thing?" she muttered, unease growing steadily in her gut. Her movements became more frantic as she pulled open drawers, checked pockets, and even looked under the bed where dust bunnies ruled. The absence of her phone felt deliberate now, almost threatening, as if someone had intentionally removed her connection to the outside world. Her eyes drifted to the living room table with the heap of unpacked clothing still on it, waiting to be sorted. A black gap in the clothes stared at her like a void. There was something flashing inside that gap, a small red light blinking rhythmically. Why is everything around here weird? She wondered. Even an innocent pile of clothing had to bear a mystery, hold something unexpected. Emily walked over to the heap, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor, and after an initial hesitation, removed the top layer of clothes. The action camera greeted her, its lens reflecting her confused expression. It had been sitting there all this time, half buried under her laundry. Apparently, she had accidentally activated it. She turned it off, put it down, and returned her mind to the missing phone. Then she stopped abruptly. Has that thing been recording all night? Even with the clothes on top of it, the audio would reveal any sounds in the room. Emily turned it back on and navigated the menu to playback, her curiosity overpowering her desire to find her phone. She looked through the files with growing apprehension. Yes, there was indeed a recording. She skipped to the witching hours of the night and played a few minutes of footage. Nothing much was audible. There, a rustling. Was that the trees outside, branches scraping against the windows, faint but distinct? Number it was nothing, absolutely nothing. Then suddenly the rustle came again. Periodically, as if someone moved around carefully, their clothes chafed and produced that typical sound of chirf-chorf pant leg rubbing. Had someone walked around the house while she slept? The visuals revealed nothing. No lights came on, or flashlights, or audio clues like whispering. Was it the bird? No, Bowdy didn't move around at night. His fluttering also sounded entirely different from these noises, usually more frantic and light. Someone had moved around, she was sure beyond any reasonable doubt. Emily stood perfectly still in the center of the room, now suddenly listening for anything in the house at this moment that might betray another presence. The silence was oppressive, almost suffocating, broken only by the periodic hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Then she realized it. The appliance's pump did sound vaguely like a person walking slowly. Gah! It was all nothing. Nothing! She shook her head vigorously. Emily put down the camera and cleansed her thoughts of this oppressive nonsense. She rushed outside into the crisp morning air. It was time to get work done, to focus on the tangible and productive, rather than chase shadows. A few hours later, Emily ran the brush down the final panel of her porch with meticulous care, admiring the fresh, even layer of pale blue paint that glistened in the afternoon sun. Hours of painstaking effort, 2 full cans of expensive paint, and countless careful strokes had gone into the job. But hey, now her little slice of the world looked bright and renewed, transformed from weathered to welcoming. Yes, there were frustrating bristles stuck all over the wall like tiny insects caught in amber, and when she'd tried to remove them with her fingers, she had accidentally smeared the paint around, creating even bigger imperfections. And then there was paint spattered all over the wooden floor in tiny constellations. But she'd learned so much about home improvement in the process. Satisfied with her accomplishment, Emily took a step back, set down her paintbrush, and climbed down from her ladder, feeling a deep ache in her shoulders and back as she stretched her tired muscles. Her fingers were still sticky with paint smudges as she cracked open a cold soda from the cooler beside her, and took a long, cool, refreshing sip before finally letting her gaze drift beyond her work to take in the surrounding property. And that's when she noticed it. A strange line cutting through the sand in her driveway, so unnaturally straight and precise that it couldn't possibly be accidental, nothing created by the random forces of nature. The line didn't look like it was made by cars or by human footsteps. It had a mechanical precision that seemed out of place in the rural setting. It was also quite thin. How had she missed this obvious anomaly thus far, despite walking past it multiple times? Something about its geometric precision caught her immediate attention, and after a few moments of growing curiosity, she put down her drink on the porch railing and wandered over for a closer inspection. The mark was faint but unmistakable, and as she nudged the sand around with the toe of her shoe, she uncovered the sharp, metallic edge of what appeared to be a metal plate embedded firmly in the ground, flush with the earth as if intended to remain hidden from casual observation. The paint fumes had left her a bit lightheaded and disoriented, and she wasn't entirely sure if this strange discovery was making her more curious or increasingly nervous. "What are you hiding?" she asked the ground, crouching down to brush more sand away from the plate's edges with her fingertips. The shape gradually revealed itself under her probing, square, perfectly aligned with the direction of her driveway. She used her paintbrush to clear away more of the sand. It revealed a small, round hole on one side of the plate, just wide enough to use as leverage for lifting. Her heart began to beat faster with anticipation. She grabbed a flathead screwdriver, slid it into the hole, and carefully pried with a strength born of curiosity. The lid groaned as it lifted on hinges stiff with age and disuse, and a rush of stale, musty air escaped from below, like the exhalation of something long imprisoned. Wrinkling her nose at the unpleasant smell, Emily leaned over cautiously, peering down into what looked like a cavernous space beneath the driveway. It stretched down approximately 10 feet into the earth, its walls lined methodically with gray cinder blocks and cement that had darkened with moisture over time. The faint odor of mold, decay, pungent and sickly sweet, assaulted her senses. She recoiled instinctively, covering her nose to block the odor, and took several steps back, more disturbed than intrigued by her discovery. What is or was this odd underground chamber? She wondered aloud. She glanced around nervously, as if someone might suddenly appear to offer an explanation for this bizarre feature. She was torn between wanting to know more about the peculiar space and feeling the hairs on her arms prickling with instinctive apprehension. She reached habitually for her phone, hoping to look up anything that might explain this strange feature, but her hand met only the worn fabric of her faded jeans. She cursed quietly under her breath, realizing with renewed frustration that she still didn't have her missing device. Taking one last apprehensive look at the shadowy cavity yawning beneath her feet, like the entrance to another world, she slammed the metal cover shut with a firm, resonant clang, letting the darkness swallow whatever secrets lay below. Of course, it was a safety hazard. As creepy as the meat man was, Emily didn't want to find him crashed into this thing in the morning, looking much like his sustenance. She filled the hole's seams back in with sand as well, ensuring that whatever spirit might have been captive down there didn't have any gaps to escape this night. Here was another question for Patrick when he finally showed up. Patrick, where on earth was he when she needed his practical advice? Did he say he'd come in 2 or 3 days? How many days had passed in her phoneless haze? Emily realized with dawning horror that without her phone, she'd have to resort to primitive methods like marking lines on the wall to keep track of passing days like a prisoner. Ridiculous. As evening gradually slipped into deepening dusk, she cleaned up her painting supplies methodically, took a quick, hot shower to wash away the paint and grime from her skin, and tried valiantly to shake off the persistent unease that had crept into her bones. But as she sat alone on her freshly painted porch, nursing a glass of red wine, the burning curiosity gnawed relentlessly at her mind, mixing with the subtle chill in the evening air that raised goosebumps on her arms. Her thoughts drifted aimlessly to the stories she'd heard about old houses and their hidden spaces, forgotten Cold War bomb shelters, concealed wells from another era, even makeshift root cellars built by resourceful previous owners for storing vegetables through harsh winters. But the unusual location directly under her driveway, the deliberate secrecy of its design, and the strange construction of the space didn't quite add up logically to any of those familiar, innocent explanations. What if it was something far worse than an innocent storage space? Some kind of hidden room designed for nefarious purposes, a trap door into something illegal or even dangerous? Had someone used the property for criminal activities, leaving behind evidence she would be better off not discovering? With a violent shudder that ran through her entire body, she forced herself to shut down the increasingly disturbing stream of speculation. Whatever it was, it had been lying dormant underground for who knows how long, probably forgotten and essentially harmless. Emily felt exhausted from the physical labor and emotional stress of the day. She checked the grandfather clock. It read 5 p.m. That couldn't possibly be right. Or was it? It felt like 2 a.m. With a defeated sigh, she headed to the living room. "All right, Bodhi. Good night, I guess." Bodhi squawked in confusion when Emily drew the sheet across his cage. She never covered her bird this early, but she wasn't sure how late she was going to last today and didn't want the poor guy open and on edge all night. "Enough if one of us is," she said with a bitter smile. When she headed for the bedroom, she passed the living room table with the clothes on it. "I'll do those tomorrow," she thought, and saw the camera. With the day's excitement, she had all but forgotten about it. She grabbed the little box and played with it in her hand while assessing the room. "I'm going to put you up tonight," she then said, and picked the top of a cabinet to sit the camera facing the front door. "If there's any action tonight," she shuddered, "I'll catch it. After I'm murdered, at least the FBI will find some evidence." She set the device to record and verified the memory card. 12 hours left. She was glad she'd picked the premium storage, plenty of room for an entire night. Next, she went around the house and made sure no hidden visitors remained. Every time she opened another closet, she tensed, absolutely expecting a spooky visitor hiding beneath a stack of old junk in the corner. But no unwanted visitors were found, and after checking all windows and the front door's lock another time, she headed to the bedroom with a defeated sigh. Tonight, she'd sleep with the lights on, at the very least in the hallway and upstairs, not to disturb the bird. She collapsed onto her bed without even changing clothes. Chapter 5. A thick, oppressive darkness spreads all around me. I hear heavy breathing, my breathing, and the sound of shifting dirt. Soil presses on me from everywhere. I'm underground in a tunnel. With no other option apparent, I position my arms in front of me, palms pressed against the damp earth, and pull myself forward. The motion is primitive, like returning to some evolutionary past where humans crawled through the muck. The passage ahead seems to have been carved by something neither human nor machine, the walls uneven and packed with strange undulations, like frozen waves of earth. Roots, gnarled and sinewy, protrude from the ceiling and walls like the arthritic fingers of buried corpses. I lie motionless, listening. The shifting of dirt, minute avalanches cascading somewhere nearby. Gradually, the darkness opens up, not with light, but with a strange awareness that comes from someplace beyond ordinary sight. Rocks, some sharp enough to slice skin and others smooth and oddly warm to the touch, are embedded throughout the earthen corridor. The occasional earthworm wriggles through the wet, rich dirt ahead. I move forward, the tunnel constricting like a throat-swallowing prey. Each of my exhales stirs tiny particles of soil that irritate my nostrils. Sweat mingles with the dirt on my skin, creating a muddy paste. My clothes, what's left of them, drag against the ground, catching on hidden stones and roots, tearing further with each movement. My limbs cast no shadows as there is no light, there is no color. Somehow I see. It's as if the mind, desperate for sensory input, has created its own method of perception, translating pressure and air movement into a facsimile of sight. I continue forward. There is no visible end to the tunnel, but there is a bend. I follow it. Moisture drips from above, fat, cold beads of water that carry the taste of minerals and something else. Some droplets run down the roots, following the twisted paths to pool in depressions below. Others land on my face, tracing chilled paths along my skin before disappearing into the collar of my shirt, now caked with dirt. There is no visible end to the tunnel, just an eternal passage winding through the bowels of the earth. Now and then there's a bend, sometimes gradual, sometimes sharp, each turn crushing the hope that the next might reveal an exit. I follow it because there is no alternative, no option to turn back. Noises emerge, a scratching, then scraping. It's not in sync with my movement. It's not from myself. I speed up. The sounds increase. My motions driven, accelerating. The air grows thicker as I progress deeper, each breath requiring more effort than the last. It carries the scent of loam and decay, of things long buried and forgotten. My lungs burn with the effort of extracting oxygen from this subterranean atmosphere. Noises emerge, faint at first, easily dismissed as imagination or the settling of earth. A scratching, like fingernails. Then scraping, something hard and unyielding. The sounds raise gooseflesh on my arms, already pimpled with cold. Something else moves back in the tunnel, toward me, too far ahead to make out. A dark splotch, changing shape. My sight deteriorates, gets spotty, and can't penetrate the darkness as easily anymore. The air grows thinner still, or perhaps my lungs simply fail to extract what little oxygen remains. My vision swims, black spots dancing before eyes that see nothing already. My eyesight fluctuates. Every time I go blind, the splotch ahead of me closes in. I pass out, and all is black. I open my eyes. The dark face of a man is in front of me. His features are indistinct, as if carved from shadow itself. Only the eyes are clear, 2 points of absolute darkness that somehow still manage to gleam with intelligence. They reflect nothing, absorb everything, twin singularities in a face of smoke. And he smiles.
Chapter 6.
Bodhi chirped energetically from within his covered cage, his melodic trills cutting through the silence that had settled over the house like a heavy blanket. The bright morning sun streamed through the gauze curtains, casting long golden rectangles across the hardwood floor and projecting the canary's animated little shadow onto the white sheet that draped his home. The silhouette danced with each enthusiastic movement, a tiny performer putting on a show for an audience of dust motes. The cage was still covered. Emily had only just now dragged herself out of bed, her mind foggy and limbs heavy with exhaustion. It was 11 a.m., yet her consciousness barely penetrated the thick veil of fatigue she camped under. Emily's fingers trembled slightly as she raised a mug of coffee to her lips. The bitter liquid scalded her tongue, but she welcomed the pain, anything to jolt her system into functioning. She shuffled toward the couch, the floorboards creaking beneath her bare feet. Emily was halfway across the living room when her eyes fell upon the action camera. She paused, coffee mug suspended mid-air, and stared at the little black box tucked away up there on the cabinet where she had left it last night. Its recording light blinked. After setting her mug down on the coffee table with a dull thunk, Emily grabbed the device. Her heart began to quicken, though she couldn't articulate why. It was only a recording, after all, a precaution. Normal people took precautions when living alone in houses. She stared at the camera's blank screen, her pale reflection appearing as a ghostly outline against the dark surface. Her finger trembled as it found the rewind button, then the play button. Emily half expected to see a masked murderer creeping through her front door, but then, if such a thing had actually happened, why was she still breathing? Either the mysterious intruder she had been so convinced was stalking her hadn't actually come last night, or a terrible thought entered Emily's mind. Was this all another one of Patrick's practical jokes? He had previously taken an odd pleasure in frightening her, claiming it was good for her nerves. The camera screen flickered to life, showing the narrow hallway that led to the front door, just the way she had set it up before bed. It wasn't an ideal angle, Emily realized now with growing frustration, but the single exterior door was clearly visible in the frame. The timestamp in the corner read 6:04 p.m., just after she had gone to bed. Absolutely nothing happened on the recording for the first several minutes. The image remained static, unchanging, and tedious in its normalcy. Impatience grasped Emily, making her skin itch and her leg bounce nervously. She fast-forwarded through hours of nothingness, the timestamp in the corner racing ahead like a digital speedometer until she slowed it back to normal around 3:17 a.m. She stared at the static hallway image for what felt like an eternity, her eyes beginning to dry and burn from the lack of blinking, her neck cramping from leaning forward toward the small screen. Suddenly, without warning, she noticed movement. The shadow of a person flashed through the frame, a dark, human-shaped silhouette cast against the pale, moonlit wall of the hallway. Emily's breath caught in her throat like a fishbone. She was wide awake now, more alert than she had been in days, as she stared incredulously at the screen, with eyes that felt too wide open. The shadow had been unmistakably distinctive, clearly human-shaped and fluid in its movement. But after passing through the frame from right to left, it didn't reappear. It was there one moment and gone the next. "What the hell?" Emily said, her voice sounding too loud in the empty house. She rewound the footage, heart hammering against her ribs, and hit play again. There it was, a shadow, cast by a person walking from right to left, outside of the camera's field of view. Emily leaned closer to the screen, squinting as if that might reveal more details, but no matter how hard she tried, nothing else was visible. Just the shadow, just the suggestion of an intruder. A cold sweat broke out across her forehead. She got uneasy and looked around her, half expecting a dark figure standing nearby, watching her. The playback continued, and Emily forced herself to keep watching. The recording showed no action for the longest time. But then, from the left, a figure entered the frame. And just like that, Emily herself came into view. The watching Emily froze the frame immediately, her finger pressing so hard on the pause button that her nail bent backward painfully. It was undeniably her on the recording, the same oversized sleep shirt, the same disheveled hair, the same pale skin. But something was fundamentally, disturbingly wrong. She was walking in the most peculiar pose, her back unnaturally curved, her arms hanging limply at her sides, like those of a marionette with cut strings. Her gait was stilted, mechanical, as if she were being controlled by some unseen puppeteer. And her eyes, dear God, her eyes were wide open, completely unblinking, staring fixedly at absolutely nothing with the glassy intensity of a corpse. "I'm sleepwalking?" Emily asked herself. The empty house offered no answers, just the sound of Bodhi chirping. Why? Emily wasn't aware of such a habit any time during her life. There had to be a rational explanation. Stress, perhaps. The isolation of country living after years in the city. Emily splashed cold water on her face, trying to clear her mind. The face that stared back at her from the mirror looked familiar, yet strange, slightly gaunt. Had she lost weight? In the early afternoon, Emily found herself back on the aluminum extension ladder, methodically painting the building's weathered backside with long, careful strokes. The repetitive motion of the brush against the old clapboard siding provided a strange, almost meditative comfort. She could see the fresh white paint covering the peeling gray underneath, and could measure her progress by the neat rows of pristine boards. She was surrounded by a constellation of tools, drinks, and gear that she had accumulated over the morning. Paint cans and brushes, a thermos of lukewarm coffee, a water bottle, various scrapers and sandpaper, a portable radio playing static-filled country music from a distant station. She had been at this particular section for hours now, losing herself in the rhythm of the work. The sun beat down mercilessly on her exposed neck and shoulders, and she could feel her skin beginning to burn despite the mild weather. Bodhi was outside with her, his cage placed carefully in a patch of dappled shade beneath the old oak tree that dominated the backyard. The canary hopped energetically from perch to perch, occasionally bursting into a sharp squawk, as if to remind Emily that she wasn't completely alone in this expanse of countryside. His presence was more comforting than she had expected it to be. When she finally stepped down from the ladder to assess her progress and stretch her back, her vision swam alarmingly. The world tilted at a dangerous angle, as if she were on the deck of a ship in rough seas, and she nearly lost her footing entirely, grabbing desperately at the ladder's rungs for support. Her knuckles went white with the effort of holding on. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear the expanding black spots that danced before her eyes like television static, but they persisted stubbornly. She squinted through the window at the grandfather clock that stood sentinel in the hallway, trying to bring the ornate numbers into focus through the glare and her swimming vision, and was shocked to discover that it was 3 p.m. "Why am I so tired?" she asked aloud, her voice carrying across the empty yard and disappearing into the surrounding woods. Bodhi chirped in response, his tiny head cocked to one side as if he were actually considering her question. "Well, because I'm sleepwalking," Emily thought grimly. "Because I'm wandering around my house like a zombie at 3 a.m. A more alarming possibility occurred to her then, creeping into her consciousness like a poisonous snake. What if there was something wrong with the house itself? She recalled disturbing stories she had read about entire families who had fallen mysteriously ill due to carbon monoxide poisoning or gas leaks in their homes, suffering from persistent headaches, crushing fatigue, vivid hallucinations, memory loss, before ultimately... She didn't want to finish that thought. Dropping her paintbrush with a clatter, she bolted around to the side of the house where the propane tank sat nestled against the foundation, among a tangle of weeds and discarded equipment. She dropped to her knees beside it, ignoring the way the damp earth soaked through her jeans. With cautious, deliberate movements, she leaned forward and carefully smelled the reservoir, the connecting pipes, the various valves, and all the surrounding area, inhaling deeply despite her racing heart. Nothing. No telltale rotten egg odor that would indicate a leak, no sinister hissing sound suggesting escaping gas. The tank and its connections seemed perfectly normal, perfectly safe. She sat back on her heels, feeling both relieved and somehow disappointed that she hadn't found such a simple explanation for her disturbing symptoms. Guess if there were a dangerous gas leak, my canary would have been triggered, she thought, glancing over at Bodhi, who continued to hop about his cage with apparent joy, seemingly unaffected by anything more serious than the occasional passing cloud. Canaries were famously sensitive to toxic gases. That's why miners had used them as early warning systems for decades. Poor Bodhi. I have such terrible thoughts about you, she exclaimed, a desperate, slightly hysterical laugh bubbling up. The joke, if it had been one, fell flat. As if on cue, fat raindrops began to fall from the darkening sky, pattering gently against the half-painted siding and raising tiny dust explosions where they hit the dry earth around the house's foundation. Emily hurriedly gathered her supplies, tossing brushes and paint cans into a large plastic bin, without regard for organization. The wind was picking up now, carrying the scent of ozone and the promise of a serious storm. By the time she had collected everything, the radio, the thermos, the scattered tools, the gentle spring shower had transformed into a proper downpour. Heavy drops pelted her shoulders and soaked through her thin t-shirt in seconds. She grabbed Bodhi's cage with both hands, the bird fluttering nervously inside as rain began to strike the bars, and ran for the back door. Her sneakers squelched in the rapidly forming mud, and her clothes were already soaked through, clinging uncomfortably to her skin like a second clammy layer. Inside the kitchen, Emily set Bodhi down carefully on the granite counter and leaned heavily against the closed door, listening to the rain drumming relentlessly against the metal roof like an army of tiny fists. Water dripped from her hair, forming an expanding puddle at her feet. She should turn on the lights to chase away the gathering gloom. She should change out of her wet clothes before she caught her death. She should eat something substantial. When was the last time she'd had a real meal? She did none of these sensible things. Instead, Emily grabbed the action camera and a handful of heavy-duty zip ties and went straight to her bedroom with determined steps. The room felt different in the stormlight, darker, more enclosed, almost cave-like. She attached the device high up on the handle of an upper cabinet door, positioning it carefully to capture the entire bed and most of the room. Her fingers worked with surprising steadiness despite her exhaustion. She pressed the record button and watched the red light begin its steady, hypnotic blinking. Now, and only now, she told herself, would she shower, get dry, and attempt to get some rest. But first, she stood there for a long moment, staring at that blinking red light. Later, when Emily finally lay in her bed, still damp hair slowly soaking her pillow and creating a cool, uncomfortable spot beneath her head, a strange sense of comfort overcame her despite everything. She had dimmed the lights until the room was bathed in soft shadows, but she could still see the red blinking of her camera. Everything would be all right, she told herself repeatedly like a mantra. Patrick would arrive tomorrow with his big laugh and his rational explanations, and together they would figure out what was happening to her. But despite these reassuring thoughts, she was so tired, so very tired, that her bones ached with it. As the storm raged outside and the camera continued its silent vigil, Emily closed her eyes and tried to surrender to sleep, even knowing that morning might bring fresh surprises captured in digital clarity. You've heard Noctambula, Act 1, written and produced by Oliver Arnold.